library too. I've been to one of them before. They were fantastic. But I'm really happy to see everyone here. I am not familiar with any of the other writers in the room, so this is going to be a treat for me. So welcome all.
All right. I'm James Maxey. I'm a writer living here in Hillsborough. I've written about 8 novels, or published about 8 novels, written about 11. My most recent one is Hush, which has a very cold-looking dragon on the front. She's the dragon of winter, so I've been thinking about winter for a while. And my next book, Witchbreaker, actually comes out as an ebook on Christmas Day. And then it will be in bookstores on December 26th. I wrote my publisher and said, really, the 26th? You couldn't get it a week earlier? But maybe they'll get some of that. So if you're really late with your Christmas shopping, keep that book in mind. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start us off with a little poem, and then I'll be bringing on the other authors. This is called Winter Sonnet, and I have written it about the day that this photograph here was taken. You can actually see was it 2 years ago that it snowed right before Christmas? Because you can see Christmas wreaths over the town is still decorated. Met the snowy morning with a shiver, inside our winter coats and heavy boots. Crossed the pristine bridge over the river, the water flowing black among the white roots. Sunlight danced upon the swirling flurry. We tried to save the moment in a frame. Your camera clicked half a second early, and that's the memory that we retain. You smiling as you turn toward the shutter. I'm laughing as you reach to grab the lens. Red cheeks, shining eyes, warm hearts aflutter as diamonds glow around us in the lens. Joy, far more sacred than a prayer, preserved forever in the frozen air. All right, our first author is going to be Our first author is going to be Mur Lafferty. She is a writer and a podcaster living in Durham. Her next book will be The Shambling Guide to New York City, and that book is coming out in May from Orbit. Tonight she's going to be reading a drabble, which I have just learned is a short story that is precisely 100 words long. That one called Zuzu's Bells. And then she's going to read a short story called 750,000 of Your Friends Like This.
You'll have to forgive me, I'm cold, so hopefully it'll last for my reading. My voice will last for my reading. Of course, I queued up the wrong story here. How are you guys? Okay. Zuzu's Bell. Lucifer despairs on the celebration of his birth. He stinks with the feces of the hopeless, the wretched. Daily he bathes in the tears of the woebegone, hoping to find the one moment where he above overlooks, disregards, forgets. That will be Lucifer's time to strike. His back twinges with fresh memories of wings long gone, his wings shattered upon striking earth below, but his shoulders remember. But it is this night when the fiery sky opens, unholy ichor sprays as leathery wings burst from Lucifer's back, and he looks up to hear the unexpected, one silver bell. If any of you have seen It's a Wonderful Life, I'd always wondered, did Clarence really get his wings at that bell? So that's why I wrote that. The next one's not quite so dark. 750,000 of your friends like this. This has some swearing. I'll tone it down a little bit, but I can't tone it down entirely. When Jefferson Marine got a unicorn tattoo after Christmas, people didn't laugh. You didn't laugh at Jefferson Marine, not over anything. Not at his scooter, not at his diminutive stature, not at his mama, who rumor had it was only 12 years older than he was. Jefferson Marine was visiting his mama, who was 15 years older than he was, thank you very much, for Christmas, like a dutiful son, when he heard the familiar words come over the radio. A Christmas Carol, read in its entirety by Orlando Bloom, brought to you by Bookface Tech. Marley was alive to begin with. Jefferson was reading a text on his phone from Half Pint, his second in command. That poor bastard was spending the holidays with his parole officer. He looked up and frowned at the radio. Was that right? Marley alive? Jefferson wasn't much of a reader, but his mother was such a fan of A Christmas Carol that he had been subjected to the tale in video and audio form multiple times every Christmas. He perked up and listened closely, probably for the first time in a decade, to the words. The story unfolded about a man named Scrooge and his powerful control of the city and those weaker around him, the sniveling poor, and then how his dead partner came to visit him. Only he wasn't dead. And in this version, Scrooge was less of a money counter and more of a street thug. And Marley wasn't his long-dead partner, but his best friend from juvie, who came back to tell him of 3 mythical creatures who would tell him where he'd gone wrong. Excuse me. The first was a fairy, but not the faggot kind. The second was a manticore. Jefferson didn't know what a manticore was, but he got the sense it was a pretty scary bastard. The third was a black unicorn, silent as a corpse, something Jefferson Marine knew quite a bit about. The body Scrooge had created, the widows he had left, the lives ended and ruined. The unicorn pointed to a grave where Scrooge's mother lay, dying a pariah for the shame of her son's crimes. When the story was over, Jefferson Marine was left with tears running down his face. 3 things were on his mind: apologize to his mother, call Half Pint, and make an appointment with his tattoo artist. He had a place on his forearm he'd been saving for a swastika. He decided to replace it with a black unicorn set. Half Pint Jones was also listening to the radio, trying to figure out how to get free of his parole officer. She was a tough old bitch named Harkness White, which Half Pint thought was funny. He'd heard she requested him because of his hate crimes, and her holier-than-whitey attitude had made him hate her kind more. And he had no family. As he'd had no family, she demanded he spend Christmas Eve with her in her piece of shit apartment. She had left to go get cranberries, and he expected she was testing him, seeing if he'd ransack the place or break out. It would be his last strike, piss her off, and he'd be back in jail for good. He was just about ready to prove the old woman right and start rifling through her sock drawer for her stash of gigolo money when the radio switched to the reading of A Christmas Carol. It was the same station as Jefferson Marine was listening to. And now we bring you, uninterrupted, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, read by Whoopi Goldberg and brought to you by Bookface Tech. Marley was dead to begin with. Half Pint Jones ignored most of it, arm deep in underwear, when he heard the words, "You will be haunted," resumed the ghost, "by 5 spirits. He paused. 5 spirits? He wasn't a Christmas literature scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but he'd been in jail last Christmas, and the warden had thought it would be funny to have every version of A Christmas Carol piped into the television. There was no watching MMA bouts. There was watching Kermit the Frog be a sad Cratchit, then Scrooge McDuck, a repentant Scrooge, and then Bill Murray, a greedy TV executive, then Alistair Sim, a dancing Scrooge, and then Tori Spelling, a smirking Scrooge. That had caused a prison riot. Perhaps the warden had wanted to teach them something, but all he'd learned was a deep-seated desire to shoplift any Charles Dickens book he came across and burn those pieces of shit people called literature. Seeing as how Half Pint didn't go to too many bookstores, he'd only done this once. And then he'd realized he'd burned one of those horror literary mashups, A Christmas Poltergeist. But 5 spirits, that made him pause. No matter what bastardization people did to the story, the thing was supposed to have 3 spirits, past, present, and future, right? So he listened. Ebenezer Scrooge encountered the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come, but he also discovered the ghosts of Christmas home and Christmas far away. When Half Pint heard how Scrooge saw his family before he was born, his radiant mother, his laughing father, and realized he had been the catalyst to souring his father and breaking up their marriage, tears filled his eyes. Then he downright sobbed as Scrooge discovered the Christmas of soldiers in foreign lands, including his friend from his apprenticeship, who wasn't named Dick, but had the same name as Half Pint's brother, which was odd, since he didn't think Moose was a common name in the 1800s. Half-Pint found himself, instead of looking through Harkness's sock drawer, looking through her kitchen. He suddenly wanted to surprise her with a pie. Harkness White sat outside in her car, listening to the radio. A Christmas Carol had just come on, and she listened to it, loving the familiar cadence. She got lost in the story, not realizing minutes were going by. It was, word for word, exactly as she remembered it. Did you enjoy the Bookface Tech presentation of A Christmas Carol read by Katharine Hepburn? If you don't feel as if you enjoyed it enough, that is likely because you are not signed up to Bookface Tech, the premier social networking site that collates your information and modifies your content to suit your needs. With over 3 billion members, Bookface is the place to be. Sign up now for free. Harkness White frowned. Her computer had broken 2 years ago. She did her email at the station's computers, and she'd never seen fit to replace it. She shrugged. Stories modified to suit my needs. Sounds horrible. She got out of her car and headed upstairs to her apartment, humming I'll Be Home for Christmas. In Seattle, Washington, production manager Jennifer Ford leaned back and sighed. 74,000 different readings of A Christmas Carol, especially designed for the reader's life and preferences, all of their steps online tracked, monitored, and run through a specific algorithm to choose which reading would be best. It had cost millions, but if it paid off, it would be worth billions. She'd probably get a new office. She smiled. Christmas Carol had been a nice feel-good test. They had changes scheduled for several classics, some designed for behavior modification, some designed just to entertain. But Jennifer Ford had an ace up her sleeve. The executive team at Bookface Incorporated was cutthroat, always looking for a way to get ahead of each other. Jennifer knew her coworkers had it out for her. She was the head of the biggest project Bookface had ever produced. She had held on to several $1,000s of her Christmas Carol budget for her job security. Because if something went awry, she was planning on sending out the 5,000 different readings of A Clockwork Orange.
All right. Our next author is Alex Granados. Okay. And he is producer for the State of Things, North Carolina Public Radio, WNC. He's also the North Raleigh news columnist for the News and Observer. His debut novel, Cemetery Plot, was released on Halloween of this year. It follows a mad scientist, a living dead medium, and a fresh one with his friends to fight and stop the zombie apocalypse. He will be bringing to us a dramatic essay called Death by Big Screen TV.
So I have to record this for my wife because this is a story about my in-laws, and she likes nothing better than to hear me talk about my in-laws. So this is a holiday-themed story because this took place during Christmas. And what you need to know to set the story up is what happened the previous Christmas. So I met my now wife about a little over 2 years ago. 3 months after we started dating, I went to Shelbyville, Tennessee to meet her parents for the first time. I flew up there, I was there for 24 hours, and I left. That entire time we spent together in a hot tub. Me, her, and her parents. So my entire introduction to them was in our bathing suits, which sounds kind of nice. I'd never been in a hot tub before, I was enjoying it, but the bubbles kept on rising up my shorts, and they were expanding like a balloon, and it would lift my butt off the floor, right? And so then I'd grab onto my wife to anchor myself down, and when I tried to do that, it looked like I was groping her. And so this is me trying to have a conversation with my in-laws while I'm groping their daughter, and they're trying to find out all about me. So that's my introduction to my in-laws, right? 24 hours, they're gone. Last year, we go back to Shelbyville, Tennessee, and we spend a week this time with her parents. Her parents like me. We've talked a little bit since then. We've laughed about the previous year's story. And I do not have any indication yet that every single Christmas I'm going to come away with a story. So this story, I've really gotten to love hot tubs. Like I said, I'd never been in one before. That was my first time. So all I wanted to do on the second Christmas trip was get in a hot tub. And I got in it a fair amount. And then on the last day, before we're going to leave, her parents say to us, "What would you guys like to do on your last day?" We said, "We just want to get in the hot tub, get out and eat, get back in the hot tub. This is all we want to do." They said, "That's fine." But then her dad says, "One thing, I have this TV that I need help moving. Would you mind helping me move it?" And I think, sure, that's no problem, normal size TV, you need 2 people, it's a little too heavy for one person, I'm happy to chip in. So he says, all right, I appreciate that. So I get up that morning, and this is, obviously in the middle of winter, and I put on my bathing suit because I know that all I'm going to do this day is get into the hot tub. And I go down, we sit, and we're having breakfast, and her father comes in and says, well, would you like to come help me move the TV now? I say, sure, that sounds great. So we walk down to his basement, which is down a long flight of steps, and he's a hoarder, so there's, toilet paper, he's bought like 20 drills that he's never opened that are stacked against the walls. We walk through this maze, this catacomb of crap, and we come to this big screen TV. And this is not your flat screen, pop it up on the wall kind of TV. This is the big screen TV circa 1980, the ones that were carved out of a solid piece of like mahogany wood and weigh like 700 pounds. And so it's one block, and there is about an inch of clearance on the bottom of this TV, and that is where you need to lift it from. And he said, and I look at it, and immediately I think, we're going to need to pay somebody to come move this. and there's 2 kinds of people in the world. My wife's family, they are doers. And what I mean by that is they will do anything, no matter what it is, as long as they don't have to pay somebody to do it. So they have this real can-do attitude. My family, on the other hand, we like to pay people to do things for us. And it's not that we have a whole lot of money, it's just that we're really inept at doing things, like carrying big screen TVs out of the basement, right? So I see it, and I'm thinking to myself, we really need to get someone to come take care of this. But I figure I will humor him, because there is no way we are lifting this TV and taking it anywhere. So it has wheels. We wheel it to the edge of the steps. Now, fortunately, from the basement to the garage, which is on the other side of the basement, it's only 6 stone steps. So I think, all right, maybe we can do this. So he gets on one side of the TV when we get to the base of the steps, and he leans down. He's a strong guy. He leans down, puts his fingers underneath there. He says, all right, on 3, you lift. So I get on the other side. I put my fingers underneath there, and they can literally just barely fit under that crack, right? So I put my fingers underneath there. He says, all right, lift. And I start trying to lift, and he lifts, and he's strong. So his part goes like a foot off the ground or something like that. And mine goes nowhere. Instead, the wood is just gashing against the base of my fingers. I'm like, stop, I'm going to lose a finger. So he's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. He puts the TV down. He's like, oh, this clearly isn't going to work. So why don't you go upstairs and talk to the girls for a little while? I'm going to figure this out. So I go upstairs, and my wife and her sister and her mom are having a glass of wine at this point. And my wife is like, are we going to get in the hot tub soon? I said, honey, and I whispered to her, I said, honey, I think that you're going to have to call someone to come get this TV. I don't think we're going to be able to get it out of here. She says, no. Yeah, Dad will figure it out, don't worry. So in a few minutes, I'm like, fine. So I just sit there, they drink their wine. A few minutes later, her dad comes up and says, all right, come down, I have an idea. So I come down there, and he has a dolly. And keep in mind that this TV is probably twice my length. All right, so he has a dolly up against one side. He's wrapped this big belt around it and attached it to the dolly. He says, I'm going to pull, you push, and get it up the steps like this. I say, fine. So I get behind it, I push, he pulls, he's just, and it goes up about a foot and just makes it over to that first step and just sits there on that first step. They're like, okay, just got to do it 5 more times. We'll get it up the steps. So he goes, all right, on 3, 1, 2, 3. He pulls, and it will not move. There's something about that first step. You just can't get it up to that second step. You can't pull it up another inch. He says, all right, Alex, go get a box, put it under your end, and we'll just leave it there for a minute and let me think about this. You go back and talk to the girls. I said, okay. Go upstairs, and at this point, my wife and her sister and her mom are eating lunch. And I sit down, it looks really good. It's like salmon and salad. I haven't had anything to eat. I'm still in my bathing suit and like a short sleeve t-shirt. And so I sit down, and my wife's like, well, how's it going? And I lean in. I'm kind of irritated at this point because all I wanted to do is get in the hot tub. I say, honey, you need to go talk to your dad, and you need to go hire somebody to come get this TV. And she looks at me and she goes, that's not how we locks do things. She turns to her sister, whose name's Dawn. She says, Dawn, let's go out and see what we can do with Dad and see about getting this TV going. So at this point, my wife and her sister are going to man up and do a better job of this than I am. So I'm following them. They're going out to the shed where my father-in-law has disappeared. And this shed is the size of their house. It's like a second house, full to the brim with all of his work stuff. Nobody dares go in there but him. And he is in the middle of it, throwing stuff around, looking for something, I don't know what. So my wife and her sister disappear in there. And I'm standing outside like, oh, God, we just need to call somebody. They come out with her dad smiling, carrying a hand winch and 2 metal poles. And I'm looking at this, this is really getting out of hand. I really need to call someone. And I was like, what are you going to do with that? And her dad's like, well, I'm going to take these 2 poles, I'm going to put them at 90-degree angles, and I'm going to wedge them up against the wall at the top of the steps. And I'm going to attach the winch to that, and attach that to the TV, and you and Don are going to push, and me and Mandy, we're going to crank the winch, and it's going to go up the stairs. And I was just like, oh my God, this is not going to work. Somebody is going to get seriously injured. And keep in mind, I have been fed a steady diet of stories about her father trying to move a pool table by himself and like gashing his hands to pieces, falling off the roof of a house trying to fix an air conditioner, being knocked out, coming to and getting back up on the house to fix the air conditioner. Like, these are the stories I've been fed. I'm like, I'm not going to survive that. So anyway, we get over to the top of the stairs. He puts the 2 metal bars in there. He attaches the winch. He attaches it to the TV. He says, Don, you and Alex, you can go to the other side of the TV. And you can't see over the TV. We have to go all the way around the house, into the kitchen, into the living room, down the stairs, into the basement, to the other side of the TV, just so we can push. We can't see them, we can just hear them on the other side of the TV. They say, all right, we have this winch hooked up. You guys push when we say 3, and we're going to pull it up the stairs. So, me and Don get up there, I look at her, I say, okay. And they go, 1, 2, 3, and they start winching. It goes, brr, brr, brr. And to my utter amazement, this thing starts moving up the stairs. And it gets up the 2nd step. And they're like, brr, brr. And me and Don are pushing, and it gets up to the 3rd step. And I look over at Don, I'm like, this is going to work. And then I hear a bang. And all of a sudden, the full weight of that TV comes crashing down on me and Don. And I'm pushing, and I put my back up against it. And I look over at Don, and I'm like, I'm not sure if we're going to make it, Don. And she's like, just hold on. And I hear my wife on the other side of the TV going, hold on, I'll get it. And I just don't know. I just don't know if I'm going to make it. And then I hear her, and she goes, I got it. And the pressure comes off. She had reattached the winch, and it just slipped off. And I looked over at Don, I go, we really need to call somebody. So her father goes, all right, on 3, I'm going to start doing it again. You guys get ready. 1, 2, 3, goes, brr, brr, brr. It goes up to the 4th step. 2 more steps to go, something like that. Brr, brr. It goes up to the 5th step. And then all of a sudden, again, I hear, bing. And the full weight of the TV comes crashing down on me and Don again. And I look over at her, and I think to myself, and I'm saying this jokingly, but at the time, I was thinking it sincerely. I wonder if Don's face is the last face I'm going to see before I die underneath this TV. So we're pushing with all of our might. We're slipping. We lose like 2 steps. It is actually pushing us further down towards the basement because it is too heavy for us. And I hear my wife going, hold on, I'm going to get it. It's going to be okay. And then finally the weight comes off, and they say, we got it. We're going to get it off the rest of the way now. And they start going, brr, brr, and it goes up all the rest of the stairs to the basement floor, and it is there. We can walk up. I walk around it. I look at it, and Don, that's the name of my father-in-law also, his daughter and him were both named Don. I say, Don, I'm impressed. I did not think you could do it. Now what do we have to do? He says, well, we have to get it to the truck. So there is a grassy hill about 30 yards away leading to the flatbed of a truck where we will have to lift it up and put it into the flatbed of the truck. And I think to myself, I really think we need to just hire someone to come get this TV. And how we got that TV to that flatbed of the truck is a story for another day. So I'll let you guess whether it happened or not.
Is Rebecca Gomez-Farrell. She is a Californian author and food and drink blogger who presently lives in Durham, North Carolina, where she writes about the food, cocktails, and various wines and spirits for CarpeDurham.com. Also the Gourmets.com and WRAL's Out and About. You can find her romance novella, Maya's Vacation, at AstriaPress.com or Amazon. And she has several horror and fantasy short stories published in magazines such as Bull Spec and Flashes in the Dark. She also delves into her superficial side with a weekly column on Glee and General Hospital at AllMyWriters.com. Someday she will complete the epic fantasy novel she's been working on for years. Expect to feel itchy when you read it. She is now going to be reading for you Treasures in Cardboard Boxes.
I don't know how I can quite follow that dramatic presentation you just had, but I'll give it a try. This is a personal essay, so it's about grammar. That's the personal part. Treasures found in cardboard boxes. I lost my father's mixtape. It is a Memorex cassette tape of Christmas carols, a priceless family treasure. The playlist, written in my father's precise and minuscule handwriting, is squeezed onto a yellowed, lined cover sheet. Side A is titled Christmas and side B Carols. Every line is filled up with black ink turning green. Most of the songs or arrangements I have never heard anywhere else and could never name if asked. Its version of Jingle Bells winds its way through multiple musical genres, Broadway, flamenco, even a perky South Pacific luau beat. An undecipherable artist sings the Jolly on Christmas Night with Verve. Then there's Sing a Christmas Song, a recording of my children's choir from the 1980s. The musical is long forgotten, but the chorus I can never forget. Oh, come and sing a Christmas song, hear the bells ring all the day long. Come and sing a Christmas song, Jesus the Savior is born. The mixtape is usually passed around by my family members in a semi-annual rotation. Ownership shifts whenever one of us thinks, oh, Dad's Christmas tape, I should listen to that. Its annual reuse and advanced age made its preservation a priority, and I was given that sacred charge a few years back. The tape was the reason I dragged my father-in-law's cassette deck from Massachusetts to Durham 2 years ago. Well, that and a kitchen drawer full of other tapes comprising my 1980s and 1990s music collection. They all needed to be transferred over to digital files before they warped completely, the song sounding more like the adults from the Peanuts holiday movie than music. I unpacked the borrowed tape player after that trip and placed it directly into a storage closet. Dad's mixtape went right on top of it. I intended to convert it first. I would do it soon, I thought, definitely. Soon ended up being about a year later. It wasn't that urgent of a need. But when I pulled the tape deck out, the mixtape was gone. I tore that closet apart, looked through every cardboard box of t-shirts from old fundraisers and freebie USB drives. Even the laundry basket, full of useless cords and cables, was empty. Nothing. It was gone. I was a wreck, but I transferred over my other cassette tapes dutifully. That shaking feeling of loss never quite lifted as Michael Jackson's dad, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Princes, he's the DJ, I'm the rapper, and my church choir's practice tape from a 1996 songbook made the transition from shiny black cassette ribbon to invisible MP3s. I was distraught because I knew I had to tell my family this hallowed heirloom was gone forever. I couldn't even ask Dad what was on the playlist so I could try and reconstruct it. My dad, you see, died when I was 10, so he's not available to fill in those blanks. As often happens, our family unit fractured in the years after his death. There were no blowouts, no fights, just a gradual separation we don't always acknowledge. My dad's Christmas tape was one of those fragile connections that still bind us. Maybe it reminds us of when we were a family, when Mom and Dad would sit in the front seat of our blue Ford station wagon while taking us to look at Christmas lights. My sister and I would fight in the back seat while peeling strips from the car's big wood paneling. Then we'd ooh and ah over the light displays on houses as we drove past them. Well, in reality, we rolled past them. This was Los Angeles. We were one car in a line of hundreds, each full of kids gaping at the lit-up snowmen and twinkling lights that mimicked falling snow we'd never see in our own yards. The soundtrack to these family outings was always the carols on that tape, playing over crackly old speakers. What's on that playlist is only one of many questions I'll never be able to ask my dad. Another question stems from being raised in a Pentecostal fundamentalist household. Growing up, I always loved horror and fantasy stories. My mother wavered between supporting my interest by retelling me the plots she had read from her contraband Dean Koontz and Stephen King novels, to fearing she was opening my mind to demonic possession. One day, near the end of elementary school, and about a year after my father had died, I went digging in the stacks of cardboard boxes containing his musty book collection. Lo and behold, I found War of the Worlds, Slaughterhouse-5, and the entire Lord of the Rings series, the ones from the 1960s with cover art that looks like it was drawn during an acid trip. My father even had the Silmarillion, an only token enthusiast attempt to read that tome. His collection didn't stop at fiction either. The biography of Malcolm X, The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, even the collected works of Karl Marx. My dad had a mini library full of the very books I'd always been told to stay far away from. I reveled in the illicit thrill I felt when I opened the first page of The Fellowship of the Ring. But just in case my modest rebellion backfired, I wrote a prayer into the margins of the book, asking God to protect me from those demons my mother feared. Then I read on, and I've never stopped. As I entered adolescence in high school, my inner progressive hippie awoke. I felt isolated in my community and extended family. I still believed in God, and I still do. But my interpretations of Scripture did not jive with the established readings, and unanswered questions simply led to more of them. You're so smart, just like your father, my mother always told me. So curious, just like he used to be. Since then, I've often wondered how similar we really would be had he lived. And I think back to those boxes of books he kept hidden away. Did he keep them because he loved them like I did, even if they weren't appropriate bookshelf material for our church? Did they inspire him to a greater social awareness like they had inspired me? Would I have had a compatriot over the Christmas dinner table? Someone to share amused, knowing glances with, while our other relatives repeated talk radio sound bites like the gospel. My dad can't fill in those blanks. My longing for answers like those will probably remain just what it is, a possibility of a companionship I probably idealize in the absence of a reality with him in it. Likely, the books were just required reading for his introductory courses at UCLA. But I keep hoping, because sometimes you find an answer even after you quit hunting for it. 2 months ago, in search of Halloween decorations, I pulled a cardboard box out of that storage closet. No sooner had I shifted it than I spied a cassette tape in the empty corner. My father's handwriting was instantly recognizable. Eureka, I had found it. I transferred that mixtape over to digital files right away, then announced the tape's reappearance on Facebook. Would you like a copy? I asked on my sister's wall. Yes, please, was her response. I loved that tape too. When I gave it to her in person, her eyes lit up with thanks for the priceless treasure, a family memory neither of us was ready to part with. As I write this, Julie Andrews sings the first few bars of Toyland from my computer. I still can't make out every name on that faded handwritten playlist, but most of them are clear. So sometimes the answers are out there. I like to think I haven't found the right dusty boxes that are hiding the other ones I want just yet.
Great. I'm going to read an essay. If anyone has ever read my books, they're pretty much centered around violence. I pretty much build every chapter around trying to get up with some sort of fight. But for this event, I really wanted to write something, kind of sweet and sentimental. So my essay is called Christmas Dismemberment. When I was a kid, I must have been aware that Christmas had some kind of religious significance. I mean, I knew about the birth of Jesus, both from endless hours of church, not to mention Linus's little speech at the end of Peanuts' Christmas special. I was also aware that Christmas was all about giving. But let's get real. Until I was well past puberty, Christmas for me was about getting. And I don't mean getting socks or a new lunchbox. It was about the toys. I'd lay awake all night, my stomach knotted, imagining the awesome things that might be contained in the gift wrap boxes under the tree. There might be trains, or Lincoln logs, or science kits with microscopes and little pre-made slides of fly wings. And there better be cars. Saturday morning cartoons had promised me Hot Wheels and the corresponding miles of looping tracks on which to race them. Even better would be a radio-controlled car or a radio-controlled plane. Really, not getting my own motorized go-kart would certainly qualify as child abuse. Alas, I never got my go-kart. I suppose there was a lesson to be learned about handling the disappointment of not getting everything you wanted. Christmas also taught me the disappointment of getting exactly what you wanted. I did get a toy train set. I set up the oval track in my attic, sliding all the little rails together with tiny metal clips, and figuring out the weirdly elaborate mechanism for one car to hook into the next. Then I plugged in the transformer and let the train fly, or if not fly, at least roll along at a respectable pace. Around the oval, then around again, and around again, then again. About 10 minutes after setting my train in motion, I pretty much lost all interest in trains. I tried to revive my Christmas morning excitement by finding interesting things that the train might crash into. The Matchbox car mysteriously broke down right in the center of the tracks as the train was approaching at full speed. And the brakes had failed. This was going to be the most horrifying crash ever. Then the train nudged the car aside and whirred on as if nothing had happened. It wasn't as if I lacked the imagination to pretend that the car had been scattered across 3 states. It was that my imagination was superior to the reality. Toys seemed designed to teach me that real life would never be as spectacular as daydreams. Despite my instinct to simulate collisions, I wasn't a particularly violent or destructive child. I don't remember having much interest in toy guns. When I did get cap guns, I ignored the gun and triggered the caps by smashing them with rocks on the sidewalk. As for destruction, the primary thing destroyed on Christmas mornings was our living room. My sisters and I were not patient unwrappers who neatly folded back the paper to slowly reveal the secrets within. We tore into those wrappers like sharks taking down a sea lion. 5 minutes after we were unleashed, the floor was completely hidden by shreds of paper and remains of cardboard boxes. Except for the tree rising from the clutter, our living room looked as if a violent but curiously localized tornado had struck. While I may not have been destructive by nature, I was intensely curious. I never set out to destroy a toy for pure meanness, but from time to time I'd steal into my father's workshop and help myself to screwdrivers and pliers to reduce a toy to its component parts. Sometimes I was even able to put them back together. I was especially fluent with bicycles. To this day, I can probably take one apart and put it back together blindfolded. I also wasn't shy about taking wrenches to things like clock radios and lamps. I often explored the inner workings with the power cord still plugged in. That was my way to see how things really worked. My failure to electrocute myself is probably something of a Christmas miracle. Usually I was able to reassemble my experiments, leaving my mother none the wiser. I do remember one toy I couldn't put back together. When I was about 9, I got a toy doll, or, to use the proper gender attribution, an action figure. It was of Captain America, evidence that my mother really didn't understand comic books. Captain America was Marvel, and I was a DC guy. Superman or Batman would have been worthy fuel for my imagination, but the Captain was just a cold lump of plastic to me. I discarded him almost the second I unwrapped him, and would have forgotten about him forever if he hadn't slipped into the couch cushions where I accidentally sat on him. I took a moment to study the Captain. He was made of blue plastic with red and white stripes, and just a tiny touch of flesh color dabbed on for his chin. The limbs were stiff, but articulated at the hips and shoulders. His head could turn a full 360 degrees, and his hands bent at the wrists, with one hand permanently making a fist, and the other frozen into a karate chop that could slide into the little handle on the round plastic shield. Examining the wrist closer, I found they were held on with tiny bolts or screw heads. I'd already started wearing glasses and knew my father had an eyeglass repair kit in the desk drawer. Despite my fondness for taking things apart, I was wise enough to know better than to disassemble my glasses. But this toy, my parents noticed. Did they care? In less than 5 minutes, I had both hands off, and I'd already lost the nearly microscopic nuts that had held the bolts in place. Unable to hold his shield, the captain had little reason to continue his existence. So I decided to satisfy my curiosity and find out what held his head on. As it turns out, not much. It popped off with just a little pressure, revealing a little plastic peg with a ball at the end that snapped into a corresponding hole in the torso. About what I expected, but the arms and legs were more mysterious. They had a wider range of motion and tended to snap back in place when I let go. I could tell that the tops of the legs were rounded and set in little cups in the hips, but why didn't they just fall out? Some mysteries are best solved with brute force. I twisted one of the legs until it snapped free. When I did this, the other leg instantly fell off. When I looked into the hollow cup that spanned the hips, something like a little brown worm fell on my lap. It was a snapped rubber band, small enough that it wouldn't have fit around my pinky. The legs had little metal hooks screwed into them that the rubber band had been stretched between, holding them in place. Were the arms held on with the same configuration? I pried one up and twisted with a little less force. Sure enough, peering into the gap, I could see the tiny metal hook holding the rubber band. I wanted that rubber band, and I wanted it intact. Action figures were a plentiful commodity, but a tiny rubber band, that would be a treasure worth showing off. I slipped the eyeglass screwdriver into the joint and carefully poked it through the loop. A few minutes of prodding and twisting freed it from the hook. I let the rubber band slip from the tip of the screwdriver, and the arm on the other side fell off. The rubber band disappeared into the hungry gap between the couch cushions. Luckily, I found it and held it into the light for closer examination of the precious gem. Action figures were meant to stimulate imagination. For me, it was this rubber band that set the wheels of my mind in motion. If I had taken this rubber band off, that meant that someone, somewhere, had put it on. Captain America's butt was stamped Made in China. When I imagined the factory, it was the elves' workshop for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, populated by Chinese people in straw hats. It impressed me that this rubber band had been touched by someone on the other side of the planet. I couldn't help but be a little awed. This toy had crossed an ocean to reach me, only to be taken apart in a little under a half hour. I found my mother in the kitchen and showed her the rubber band. When I explained that I'd taken apart the doll to retrieve it, she looked a little hurt that I destroyed yet another gift. She sighed. What did you do that for? At the time, I didn't have an answer. From the perspective of adulthood, I do. I took the doll apart because I'm driven by a need to understand how things work. It's why I took apart my bike and the lamps and hinted at my future when I would be driven to more sophisticated bouts of creative destruction. I've taken apart friendships, even marriages, before I understood what made them work. I've aimed my curiosity at my own mind, analyzing the mystery of why I am who I am, figuring out my own clockwork, solving the mystery of what makes me tick. While I was never able to put Captain America back onto his feet, I like to think I bolted myself together in an improved configuration. I'm an adult who's never let his imagination wither. To this day, I can still look at something as mundane as a rubber band and find myself thinking of foreign lands. My parents never smothered that curiosity by putting an end to my destructive explorations. That, I think, was the greatest gift they ever gave me. All right, have you ever had a problem on your job where someone dismissed your trouble by saying, it's not rocket science? Well, for Gray Reinhardt's Air Force career, it really was rocket science. Specifically, he worked with space and missile engineering and operations. His space background is a natural fit for his budding career as a science fiction writer, where he can boast of being one of the few authors ever to have stories featured in both Analog and Asimov's in the same month. Gray's military experience has also led him to becoming a musician, since he first started playing guitar at Thule Air Base in Greenland, which must certainly have given him some keen insights about the true nature of winter. Tonight, he's going to play 2 new songs for us, starting with Winter Simplifies the World.
Thank you, James. I should have given you the pronunciation. It's actually Thule.
Thule, okay.
Air Base. Thule Air Base is about 700 to 800 miles south of the North Pole. And Yeah, the winter there was interesting. The sun sets at that latitude on Halloween, and it doesn't rise again until Valentine's Day. I was lucky in that around January of that year, I got to come home for a few weeks. And so I got to fly south and eventually to see the sun again, which I hadn't seen for several weeks. But then I had to fly back into the darkness. But yeah, this first song is definitely informed by that experience. Let me just make sure it's going to. Sun for months on end, the ice-laden winds blow blinding storms down to the frozen bed, and the solstice noon is midnight dark, and the cold will not relent, and every soul despairs a little as the old year fades away. And I'm amazed at how much winter seems to simplify the world, as it hides the paths we hope to take and wraps the earth in crystal white. It gives us long cold months to meditate on what's behind and what's ahead. We're on the cusp of new beginnings, when winter simplifies the world. Of my heart were chipped away and dropped with all the warmth of moonlight on newly fallen snow. Still I'm amazed at how much winter seems to simplify the world, as it hides the paths we hope to take and wraps the earth in crystal white. It gives us long cold months to meditate on what's behind and what's ahead. We're on the cusp of new beginnings. If we make it through the longest night, if we survive to see the dawn, melt the ice that binds, then we'll know we have the strength to carry on. Because the snow-covered world is lonely, waiting for the sun and warmth and life. She doesn't wear a shroud, but a lacy veil to hide her bridal smile. And it will lift like fog, and she'll kiss us with lips soft as a budding rose, and we will stand in the cool spring morning, enthralled and tranced, beguiled. Be amazed at how much winter seemed to simplify the world, as it gives the paths we hope to take and wrap the earth in crystal white. It gave us long cold months to meditate on what's behind and what's ahead. We were on the cusp of new beginnings, when winter simplified the world. We were on the cusp of new beginnings, when winter simplified the world. We're always on the first asked me to write a song for this event, that was sort of that's what I ended up with, because I was thinking about all the metaphors of what winter, loss, and death, and birth, and all those kinds of things, and I realized that's really heavy. So I decided a couple weeks ago that I really needed something a little lighter. Most of the songs that I write are in the genre known as filk, which is science fiction and fantasy related music. And so I started thinking about science fiction winter type combinations and looked online for a few ideas. Actually found a column that John Scalzi had written at one point. But one of the most iconic images from science fiction film that has to do with winter is actually in The Empire Strikes Back, and because a lot of it takes place on the planet Hoth. Now, those of you who are familiar with the film, what are the creatures that Luke rides out on, and then Han Solo has to ride out on the creature to rescue Luke? What's it called?
I don't know it, but I know what they look like.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a panther. Yes.
Somebody said it. Tauntaun.
Yeah, Tauntaun.
Yeah. So this song is called Tauntauns to Glory. I dreamed that I was on the ice world Hoth. High above in orbit was our imperial foe. They set down their crazy elephant walking machinery of death. So we saddled up our Tauntauns to meet them in the snow. We were riding our Tauntauns to glory. Riding our Tauntauns to glory. We were riding our Tauntauns to glory. Riding our Tauntauns to glory. By the way, you can sing along on the chorus if you want. Sorry, normally there would not be this big break in the middle of the song. Now, if the tree huggers have their way, and our SUVs are rusting out in the salvage yard, I hope the geneticists make some Tauntauns out of recombinant DNA. And life in the newborn stage might not be so hard. We'll be riding our Tauntauns to glory. Riding our Tauntauns to glory. Yes, we'll be riding our Tauntauns to glory. Riding our Tauntauns to glory. When you venture out riding on your Tauntaun, be careful not to stay out too long in the night, or you might want to take a pop-up igloo and survival kit, so you won't have to cut up your Tauntaun and spend the night inside. We'll be riding our Tauntauns to glory. Riding our Tauntauns to glory. We'll be riding our Tauntauns to glory. Riding our Tauntauns to glory. Riding our Tauntauns to glory. Riding our Tauntauns to glory.
Plan to have our big finish. Thank you for seeing it. So I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. Feel free to stand around and mingle. We still have plenty of cookies and hot cider. Eat as many cookies as you can. My wife and her own diets. Lest we take long, but let's get
Thank you.
Thank you very much.